truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta. You're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines, as always. The Justice Department has unredacted names like billionaire Les Wexner, assistant Leslie Groff, and modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel as Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators in a 2019 FBI document. President Donald Trump has vowed to halt the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge connecting Detroit and Vista unless Canada shares ownership and compensates the U.S. for perceived trade imbalances. The White House has updated its fact sheet on the historic U.S.-India trade deal, removing mentions of tariff reductions on certain pulses and softening language on India's purchase commitments. A mass shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia leaves 10 people dead, including the suspect, with over 25 injured in attacks at a high school and a nearby home. Police found 6 victims inside Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. US President Donald Trump escalates tension with Iran, threatening aggressive actions if Tehran doesn't meet US demands on nuclear and missile issues. In a recent interview, Trump stated that without a deal, the US would have to do something very tough amid ongoing talks mediated by Oman. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky intends to reveal plans for presidential elections and a peace deal referendum on February 24, marking the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reaches the US for his 7th meeting with President Trump since the start of his 2nd term, focusing on escalating tension with Iran. The emergency discussion comes amid US-Iran negotiations. France reels from revelations in a massive pedophilia case involving Jacques Lavougle, linked to the abuse of 89 minors across 8 countries over 55 years, including 2 murders. All right, viewers, we have some fresh updates concerning the Chinese yuan that has surged to its strongest level since May 2023 after reports that Beijing has urged banks to limit their holdings of US treasuries, adding to signs of a broader shift away from the dollar. Both the onshore and offshore yuan extended gains to multi-level highs, trading around 6.91 per dollar. The currency is now the 3rd best performer in Asia since late September, up about 3%. Market sources say Chinese officials asked banks with a heavy exposure to US government debt to scale back their positions, though no targets or timelines were given. The guidance does not apply to China's state holdings of treasuries. The move is seen as reinforcing a global trend of diversifying away from dollar assets, potentially encouraging capital to flow back into Chinese markets and providing further support for the yuan. Analysts also point to dollar weakness amid uncertainty over US fiscal and trade policy under Donald Trump, as well as a more tolerant stance from the People's Bank of China toward a stronger currency, a shift that could signal a longer-term change in China's exchange rate strategy. Joining me now for this discussion is Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, Foreign Affairs Security and Strategy Analyst, joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Collins, thanks very much for joining us here. Firstly, news now coming in after we've already reported since a few weeks how Chinese economy has seen a resurgence. Now the yuan is also showing surging, doing rather well vis-a-vis the dollar. How much do you think China is now going to move ahead in reducing its dependence to the US dollar, and what is next now for the Chinese economy and the contributing factor for this surge of the yuan?
Yes, we've seen how this is not a currency story or surge alone. It's a power story. It's the narrative framing by China that is sending this signal that financial statecraft is part of its overall strategic toolkit. Of course, he is trying to send a very strong message also that he has the tools, the capacity to respond as a tit for tat move against this ongoing measures by the US in terms of restricting Chinese access to tech capacity, as well as different sanctions and tariff in place. And of course, also he has to be careful in this because he remains cautious that destabilizing the US Treasury could also prove to be a backfiring move for China itself. The yuan surge also reflects. Of course, we have seen how this move to have this diversification in terms of strategic reserve, and of course also he has all these calculations in place, and we have seen how the impact of this surge in yuan in terms of the domestic market in China also, where a stronger yuan also helps in terms of the efforts to reduce imported inflation, as well as also to improve the sentiments of investment, the investors, and to stabilize or to control the capital outflow. And this has been ongoing for years now, and this is one of the moves also to ensure that it doesn't continue to hurt the Chinese economy, and to improve sentiments for China overall. But of course, this is I see that from the framework of the strengthening narrative from China, that he has still the toolkit to coordinate this whole structure of the economic competition with the US, and but it's an attempt also to reshape the whole notion of capital allocation and to stem the tide of this unchecked capital outflow from China. That's the primary motive for now.
All right, Collins, thanks for your comments. They are requested to stay on as we now proceed. Viewers, there's some news also concerning Chinese nationals in Australia. Now, 2 Chinese nationals have been charged with foreign interference in Australia for allegedly gathering information about the Canberra branch of a Buddhist group, Guan Yin Sita, on behalf of a Chinese government security agency. The pair, aged 25 and 31, are set to appear in court today, making them the 4th and 5th individuals charged under Australia's foreign interference laws. The charges follow an investigation that started last year with help from the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation. This comes amid growing concerns over foreign influence and security in Australia, with each defendant facing up to 15 years in prison. Collins, another time when a country is leveling charges of surveillance and foreign interference on Chinese individuals, we'd seen earlier reports from the United Kingdom, and now from Australia, similar cases emerging. How do you think China is going to tackle the developments?
Yeah, both sides want to be careful with it, because we have seen how recent momentum has been encouraging, from the past couple of years now, and since this trade normalization after the 2020 to 2022 tariff disputes and these frosty ties before that, and but we have seen how with this in place, this is also a signal that Australia is also moving from risk mitigation phase to one of more active deterrence in terms of capacity, in terms of readiness to act. There's also this shift from defensive rhetoric into more action-based, action-oriented results on the ground, to send also a strong message to China that these actions will not be tolerated, and to also galvanize domestic trust and confidence and support in terms of maintaining and ensuring the national interest and safety and security of Australia as a whole. So we have also seen how this greater intelligence efforts, and in terms of intelligence confidence in this attribution, and also the readiness by Australia to accept some kind of diplomatic fallout from Beijing. Of course, we will expect Beijing to respond, to deny these allegations, and to accuse Australia of being tied into this bloc mentality of Cold War, bloc narrative and Cold War mentality, and as a politicization of this issue. But we have seen how this is a strong stance being projected, that Australia is still standing as a frontline democracy in strengthening the Western world in terms of this overall strategic competition with China. And of course, the US, Japan, and India will be also watching closely as part of the Quad members, and how Australia is using these legal frameworks, which have now been seen to be mature enough, to be aligned enough to prosecute these cases, rather than just investigating. And of course, also this is also a strong signal also from the framework to China.
Collins, what do we know about the Canberra Buddhist Association, which, they are saying that this is a group that they were using to get more details and, spy on?
Well, we've seen how, this, I don't think this is a precedent. We have seen that before, and especially with the case of Australia. Different, efforts have been used, different tools have been used from economic retaliation, from economic tools. And of course, also this will also invite, counterclaims and arguments. And of course, this is now being seen as a national security issue, and for sure there will be different interpretations, and but I don't see that happening, at least domestically in Australia. We have seen how both sides of the aisle will also want to consolidate on this issue to strengthen and to protect the sanctity of sovereignty of Australia as a whole, and to China that, despite efforts to strengthen economic ties on the security domain, on the security sphere, and on the sensitive political issues, red lines are still in place, and that there's no tolerance on this kind of behaviors or efforts as part of the influence-seeking activities by other countries, especially by China. And we foresee that Australia will continue to take this hardened stance independently from the parallel focus also on strengthening overall ties. But of course, this will not be compromised at all levels, and I think this is a message being sent now by the current administration.
All right. What do we also know about the pair? It was a 25-year-old and a 31-year-old who were gathering these information. They're now facing a 15-year sentence. What kind of interjection can China now put here?
Well, it remains to be seen as to the extent of the the willingness of China to be involved deeply in this case. And of course, he is also facing a very tight situation, dilemma also for Beijing, to escalate further, which will risk, further straining of ties between both nations, which will also have negative spillover impact, and or to double down hard, and of course also to use other tools, including on trade, on economic platforms which have been used before against Australia, which will then risk, further retaliation for Australia as a whole. And then we have this endless cycle of, ups and downs in these frosty ties, and also you galvanize the entire mechanism of other nations aligned to Australia, including Quad. But to be seen as doing nothing, then will then risk, further drawbacks in terms of the efficacy and willingness of China to stand up for itself, and to accuse and to use this as a pretext to accuse the West of politicizing this matter. So I foresee that there will be responses from Beijing, but stopping short of an outright total or wholesome actions being taken that will risk further ties with Australia, seeing how important that will be in terms of the Australia being part of the overall frontline mechanism by the US especially, and with regards also to the impact of Australia geographically in terms of checkmating China's move in the Indo-Pacific, especially in Southeast Asia, with regards to the the AUKUS bases in Perth and in different places.
Now, a warning has also been issued from the ASIO Director General that's been given to the AFP and Counter Foreign Intelligence Interference Task Force last year, and it says that multiple foreign regimes are monitoring, harassing and intimidating members of our diaspora community. It's important, Collins, given that the Bondi aftermath that Australia is going through. How do you view the strong responses now to foreign meddling or interference that Australia is looking at, because immigration came up as a big concern following the shooting at Bondi?
Well, certainly it adds to the overall momentum and the active awareness realization and the of course the understanding from the part of the Australian public to have more awareness and the willingness also to confront these issues, especially with the recent terrorist incident in Bondi. And we've seen how this has synergized the whole notion of defending strongly the core interests of Australia, and to ensure that the public confidence and public trust on the institutions to defend the sanctity and the interests of the nation as a whole. And of course, this is a continuation from that incident, and definitely, and this is not the first time, however, for Australia to take hardened measures to protect its own interests and security. But we have seen how the readiness of the current administration also to ensure that there's no slip-throughs and there's no gap being left open to any potential future attempts that will risk the future safety and security of the nation and the people as a whole. And hence we have seen how these measures are in place to instill greater institutional confidence and to get the needed public support from the whole nation.
All right, Collins, we also are getting some reactions now from Beijing. Beijing viewers has urged Australia to prudently handle the arrests of the two Chinese nationals on charges of a foreign interference after they were accused of spying on a Buddhist group at the behest of a Chinese police. That's a breaking news that we are coming up with. China has urged Australia to handle the case prudently and properly, and to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens, as per the Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian. He was making that statement during a news conference, denying knowledge of the specific details of the case. After Canberra arrests two Chinese nationals, now Beijing is warning to handle the case with prudence. Viewers, with that, we are now going to move on. Now, Riot police have fired tear gas and water cannon at protesters throwing Molotov cocktails and flares during a demonstration Tuesday night in central Tirana. This is news from Albania, where thousands of opposition supporters were demanding the resignation of Albania's government. The Albanian police has said that 16 protesters were treated in the hospital for burn and other injuries, as 13 protesters were arrested. Albania's Prime Minister Rama's government has come under fire over corruption allegations involving Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Baluku, but Rama has resisted calls to dismiss her. There have been growing demands that lawmakers lift Baluku's immunity from prosecution, which can only be done in a parliamentary vote. All right, Collins continues to stay with us here. Collins, charges of corruption on the Albanian government are rather high. We are seeing the protests and demonstrators there. And on top of that, the US is working with Albania over its nuclear program. How do you view these parallel developments?
Well, the political situation in Albania has been expected. We've seen how structural and systemic issues have been prevalent in terms of whether allegations of corruption or governance issues, and the rising public dissatisfaction and sentiments of the people in terms of the frustration and distrust and mistrust of the government. And of course also the disputes over electoral sanctity, and there's this little to none of this political cohesion between the ruling and the opposition blocs, where political polarization still remains high. And we have to remember that it's still the candidate country for the EU, and violence in the capital will of course damage the sentiments, the reputation, the trust, and also raises concerns about the standards of and the efforts of maintaining rule of law. So of course we've seen how important this country has been in terms of the larger equation between the EU and of course Europe, as opposed to the involvement and support system from the US, as well as the potentially new involvement from Russia, which will use this as a potential new opening and pretext for further tools and efforts to amplify further narratives and in undermining the overall integrity and cohesion of Europe and EU as a whole. And of course, the Balkans have been have gone through different crises before in the past, and the overall Euro-Atlantic cohesion in terms of the importance of Albania to the overall foreign policy strategy of the US, especially under the Trump administration, with regards to the war in Ukraine, also has been gaining in terms of strategic importance. And this is certainly being watched closely by both sides, and it remains to be seen. But I foresee that they will be strongly involved and will be invested in this, in ensuring that stability will still prevail, and that early actions are taken to prevent any further escalations which will have the risk of further risk and disarray down the road in the next couple of days from now.
Right, Collins, thanks very much for staying on with us for these discussions. And we now move on, viewers, to news from Bangladesh, where millions of young voters are set to vote for the first time in a landmark election following a student-led uprising that ended Sheikh Hasina's autocratic rule. Young voters aged 18 to 37 make up 44% of the electorate, many of whom previously didn't vote under Hasina's 15-year rule. This election sees the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and Jamaat-e-Islami coalition leading the charge, while Hasina's Awami League has been banned. Meanwhile, the Hindu minority remains on the edge, recalling past election-related violence and hoping for peace. Let's first listen in to some citizens.
আমি বিগত তিনটা নির্বাচনের একটা নির্বাচনে ভোট দেইনি, ভোট কেন্দ্রে যাওয়ার চেষ্টা করেছি একবার, কিন্তু শেষমেশ যাওয়া হয়নি। আর বাকি দুইটা নির্বাচনে আমি ভোট কেন্দ্রে যাওয়ার আগ্রহই পাইনি, ভয় এবং এক ধরনের শঙ্কা থেকেই মূলত আমি আসলে
সব সময় যে দলই রাষ্ট্র ক্ষমতায় থাকুক আসলে ওই পরিস্থিতির শিকার সংখ্যালঘু সম্প্রদায়ের উপরেই হয়। যে নির্যাতনটা হোক আর যাই হোক, আসলে তো সংখ্যালঘু সম্প্রদায় যারা তারা দুর্বলই থাকে, আর আঘাতটা তাদের উপরেই হয় বেশি। হ্যাঁ, আমরা এখনো পর্যন্ত আমাদের চিন্তাভাবনা আছে যে আমরা ভোটের মাঠে যাব, ভোট দেব, যদি কোনো বিশৃঙ্খলা না হয়, দেশে যদি এর চেয়ে কোনো খারাপ অবস্থা না হয়। হ্যাঁ, তবে প্রশাসনের কাছে আমার চাওয়া পাওয়া আছে যে আমাদেরকে যেন আরও একটু নিরাপত্তার ব্যবস্থা করে, কারণ আসলে তো যারা সংখ্যালঘু সম্প্রদায় তাদের মনে ভীতি কাজ করে সবসময়, নির্বাচন আসলে একটা কাজ করেই। তো সে কারণে প্রশাসনিক একটু তৎপরতাটা আমি আরও বেশি চাই।
Political commentator Prashanta Kumar Shil now joins us in this discussion from Dhaka. Prashanta, thanks very much for joining us. We're seeing how the tide is in favor of Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP, especially after Awami League is not even contesting the polls. But what is the situation on the ground like? People are asking for security. Can that really be guaranteed if the leading coalition is elected?
Yes, it's a very situation from voting situation. Very people are just waiting what the tomorrow's vote actually. And you know that the this after you already mentioned the regime change of in Bangladesh in 5th August. You know that 2024. What is happening? So, but you see the total scenario. This election is the first time election for the Gen Z revelation. I think from the world. So
Yes.
people are just exciting to see what is happening in the Bangladesh election for the polling and scenario. And you know that the Bangladesh the social media in hypes. There is some equation is coming in front of the voter and the mass people. They see the Facebook reels, memes, and everything, and YouTube search. There is some hype from the Jamaat Islam at the present time, but the real scenario is different. You know that in Bangladesh, you see the analysis of vote. There is a belief from the root level to and the mass people. They haven't just till now they believe in the two-party system vote in Bangladesh. You know that the one major party is Awami League and another is BNP, most largest in the ever time. But you see that there is some after the 5th August, you see that there is lots of political party rising in Bangladesh in the history. But it's a very tough question and pivotal question if they haven't getting vote for the new people, the students especially, the new younger generation. So this is a very big debate question, and it will be say not to say high time before the result published. So we are just waiting to see what is happening, the vote system equation, because all everything is depend on equation, bargaining and everything. And also the very important issues for the security issues. People are deliberately talk about the security. If you don't ensure the security, people are not entered to the vote center. So this is important, and also the very crucial point. And every media is missed out the minority issues, minority Hindus in Bangladesh. You see that there's a couple of last 2 months and 3 months deliberately killing from the Hindu minority in the banner of the miscreant and everything. But this is a very important question, pivotal question for the authority and election commission and everything to ensure safety and security to the minority and everything, because they are the happening. And you know that all the people are just taking the part from Hindus vote, because the Hindu vote, the present election is a very game-changing factor for the people who is just endorsing our the 13th national election in Bangladesh. So you can just avoid, you can just from kept out from the boot camp is very not a wise decision for every political party. So this is that they are happening, and you have to mention if you to introduce a fair, free, and very absolute election in the present time. So another my concern issues, you see that the present time is from election, there is some movement, some happening, and also the people have just eagerly waiting to make sure his vote. But it's a question for the how we can safely and we can just connectively make our vote from effectively. So this is a very pivotal question for the people of the Bangladesh and also the world people. Just waiting to see what is happening from the tomorrow's vote.
All right, Prashanta, thanks very much for giving us a comprehensive assessment of the situation there. And we now move on. Viewers, Canadian police are saying that 9 people have been killed in a mass shooting that targeted a school and a nearby residence in what officials are calling a shocking and close-range attack. Witnesses describe the violence as happening suddenly, with one saying, quote, "It's that close." Emergency services rushed to the spot as police secured the area and launched a major investigation. Authorities have not yet released full details about the suspect or the motive, but Prime Minister Mark Carney has condemned the attack and offered condolences to the victims' families. Officials say more information will be shared as and when confirmed.
I think the last time, you know, the school shooters in Canada, there was one every few years as opposed to one every few days down in the States. And, you know, I used to kind of go, you know, look at Canada, look at who we are. But then, you know, then that one school shooting every 2.5 years happens in your town, and things are just go, you know.
Moving ahead, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, has confirmed that its contract with national security firm Piraton, the project manager for a major air traffic control modernization, is worth $1.5 billion. FAA Administrator Brian Bedford told lawmakers that Trump negotiated a $200 million discount from the original proposed price last December. The contract is part of a broader $12.5 billion effort to overhaul the aging U.S. air traffic control system. The FAA says the deal includes a strict no exclusive performance clause with payments linked to schedule, cost control, quality, and management targets. Key focus of the overhaul is moving computer systems at 318 FAA facilities into a modern cloud-based network. The agency has already obligated $1.6 billion and created 40% of telecom connections and plans to install 612 radar systems by 2028. Congress approved the overhaul last year amid staffing shortages and technology failures, but transportation officials say an additional $19 to $20 billion is still needed to complete the transformation. And viewers, that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World.